All right. Well, everybody, welcome everybody to part two of our Life to Eagle presentation. All right. So last month, the presentation, first part one, was given to Dave Leahy. So um, thank you, Dave, for taking care of that. I was uh, detained with giving a midterm exam on that particular day, so I was unable to go about and be part of that. All right. So anyway, so the big thing that we want to look at today here is kind of talk about what occurs after the project. Okay, how do we go about and go from the project being done all the way up through the Eagle Board of Review and the Court of Honor and stuff like that. So those are kind of the main things we want to hit on today. Um, one of the items that it is going to mention, we're going to kind of like reiterate a couple of things just so that we know what we're talking about here. So we're just not diving into the different stuff with those. Um, so let's go ahead and start kind of working in on what we've got going on here. And so, okay. All right. So first of all, one of the big things that just wanted to remember or remind everybody here is that if we do go about under our the different forums, they are on the Pathway to Adventure website. All right. Eagle Resources is oftentimes PTAC. Eagle Resources is what I do a Google search on, and a number of different things in here with the project workbook. We'll talk a little bit about that. But some of the other stuff is kind of the things that are happening after the after we're going through and doing the project. Kind of what's going to be, what is the application process? How does that come down? Things about the Eagle Rank application, letters of references, and things like that. As we get moving towards the Eagle Board of Review, we want to include those things. So those are going to be some more paperwork items that we want to go through and possibly talk about in there. All right. So here's kind of doing a quick look at what that website looks like. Okay. And so normally, if you were already into the project and stuff like that, most likely the Scouts should have the project workbook at this point in time. But there's a number of different items in there, the application, letters of recommendation, etc., that are going to be useful for people to go about and have access to. So we'll refer back to those things as we move into it. All right. Before going through and kind of diving in, is a kind of a quick refresher. What must we do to earn the Eagle rank? So what are those different requirements? One of the things is that, this is actually coming from the Guide to Advancement. And so Chapter 9 there is kind of talking about these items. And so all the main important stuff that we're looking at are kind of hidden inside of that Guide to Advancement. Not necessarily hidden, but most people, other than the members of our council advancement chair, not too many other people go through and actually read that stuff. There are a few, but most of the time that could just be like advancement chairs in a unit, or some people who are the district Eagle coordinators. So not many people at the unit level go about and go through and read all those. All right. So big thing we want to look at this is that before your 18th birthday, okay, requirement one is to be active in your troop for at least 6 months, demonstrate you live by the Scout Oath and Law, earn your 21 merit badges, okay, 14 of which are required, all right, and again, reminding everyone, some of these take 3 or more months to get done, so it's not, we do have to make sure we plan properly with all these. Of those other merit badges, 7 of them are elective, so you can kind of pick and choose pretty much any out of the 130 some odd merit badges. I forget the exact total at this point in time. It's probably pushing up about 140, I would think, at this time, with stuff. There's also needs to be hold a position of responsibility related to your unit for 6 months. And then the really big one is that plan, develop, give leadership to others in a service project. All right, so there's kind of the big thing that we want to go about and kind of hit on with most of the stuff with this. And then the last item we do want to put down here is we want to mention here that this is the Scoutmaster Conference. And while most everybody does kind of the Scoutmaster Conference is almost like the last item before getting into the Eagle Board of Review, or before any board of review, Scoutmaster Conference for any rank does not have to be the last item. All right. And so we oftentimes encourage scouts, particularly if they are kind of pushing and getting close to that 18th birthday, to make sure that they possibly schedule that Scoutmaster Conference beforehand so they get it done. Doesn't necessarily mean that they couldn't also have another discussion with their Scoutmaster after they've get closer to the to that rank of Eagle and turning in the application with this. But it certainly is an important thing that, we don't want to go about and have somebody, because of different people getting busy with stuff, schedules conflicting, or for some reason they can't have that Scoutmaster conference until after their 18th birthday, and then that ends up being kind of a real challenge with that. All right. Anyway, if we're trying to look at kind of this timeline, all right. So we're kind of looking at here at one end of our timeline where that life board of review occurs. So when you become the rank of life, all the way through your 18th birthday. All right. And we need, as we mentioned in here, at least 6 months, but many scouts, this ends up being kind of a year, 2 years, maybe even more than that. And so those are going to be the those 6 requirements that we just mentioned. And most of the stuff that we're really going to look at inside of here is going to really focus in on that requirement 5, completing the Eagle Scout Service Project. So those are a lot of times where a lot of the questions come into play. Okay, so in terms of our Eagle Project timeline, as we're going through and looking at this, particularly thinking about specifically the project, okay, beginning on is that we need to go about determine the project, go about and kind of complete the proposal section in the workbook, get that proposal approved, come up and complete the planning section. Then at this point, we actually have where we're able to go through and kind of complete the project. All right. Then there's a report section in the workbook. All right. So a whole lot of different things going on in this workbook. After that's going to be done in here, we get all the different final project signatures. And then after we've done that, so that's going to be the main thing in terms of the project. But in order for us to go about and get to our board of review, next thing we need to do here is we have to go about and get the Eagle application completed, okay? Get that verified by council. And once that's going to be verified by council, then we can go about and have that Eagle board of review. All right. So of all these different steps that we're kind of looking at here, in terms of our part 1 presentation, so what was done last month, we really talked about these kind of the first 4 getting into when you're going to work and complete on that project. All right. And so what we really want to start talking about today is we kind of finish up in kind of part 2 of this presentation is going to be the remaining items, okay, that are going to be on this timeline. So we're kind of assuming that the scout has gone about and they're completing, they're working with their project, and then what's going to be the rest of the steps that they need to make sure that they go through and follow in order to get that board of review. All right, so those are kind of our approach and what we're kind of looking at and what we're planning on talking about here tonight. All right, so when we start thinking about the service project, okay, there's some very specific wording in there that we want to make sure that we go about and talk about here. And it says here, while a life scout, plan, develop, and give leadership to others, okay, in a service project to any religious institution, any school, or your community. So those are kind of the main verbiage points that we have. One of the other items that we also want to make sure that we work with this is that there is a requirement that the scout must use that workbook, all right, in order to deal with this. And so here's kind of the big thing that goes on here. Now, so this is kind of, we're looking at here, this is that requirement 5. And one of the big questions that comes up during the Eagle Scout Board of Review is whether or not the scout did all this. Okay, so that's certainly a question that is being asked and needs to be answered during that Eagle Scout Board of Review. And so big thing that happens with this, and part of the main task of the workbook, is to make sure that the answer is yes. Okay, we want to go about here, and when the scout goes into that Eagle Scout Board of Review, we want to make sure that it's a slam dunk. Yes, they've gone about and they've completed all this stuff in here, that everything, all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed. And the use of the workbook in there is really going to be the big thing, or one of the main things that really helps do this in here. Part of the big question that kind of comes in here is this ability here to plan, develop, and give leadership. All right, so those are some of the main things that we're looking at having done in terms of this service project that we're going to do here. And inside of the workbook, there's different sections in there, and filling out all these different things really help and really document the fact that the scout did go about and do the planning, they did development, they did show leadership. So this is where using this particular workbook, okay, is really helpful in terms of making sure that there isn't some outstanding question about was this service project requirement really successfully completed or not. So those are a few things that we wanted to make sure we mentioned. Now, as we start looking about the service project, I've kind of got it broken down into kind of 7 phases. Okay. First one in here is determine the project idea. Okay. Write up the project proposal. Okay. Get the project proposal approved, write up the project plan, and then carry out your project in there. And so these first couple of steps, this was going to be the main thing that we went through and we did in the last presentation here. So now we're going to go about and kind of focus in on the remaining phases, which is then going to write up the project report, okay, and then get the project completion signatures. All right, so these 3 items here that we have as part of in bold, those are going to be items that are going to be inside of this workbook. All right. And those are things that we're going to go about and document. And by showing this, expanding your proposal into your plan, going through here and writing up and giving different reports. How did things go? What worked well? What changes might have occurred in the report? Those are certain things we want to go about and address and make sure that those are items that are well known or understood going into that board of review. One of the big things that happens here with this report is many of the questions that are inside of that report are things that are oftentimes brought up, very commonly brought up during that Eagle Scout board of review. So one of the things that I oftentimes think about with this report is that's kind of like a worksheet as to, hey, what are some questions that might be asked during the board of review? And let me try to figure out what my answers were going to be. All right. So this also becomes not only a workbook, but somewhat of a cheat sheet. Okay. We could say that in there because one of the items that is going to be present at your Eagle Scout board of review is going to be the workbook. Okay. And so if a scout were to ask a question and they're kind of all of a sudden draw a blank, I can't remember what was going on with this, they could say, wait a minute, hold on. I answered that question in my report. It's right here sitting on the table. Let's look and see what I wrote down. All right. So those are certain things we can go about and do in order to make sure that scout successfully completes that board of review. Again, we're looking here to kind of dot those I's and cross the T's. All right. So as we're saying here, those last 3 things, those are the main things we want to kind of finish up and talk about in detail during this presentation. All right. So here's going to be the workbook. And so mentioned in here, that's available in terms of the council website. All right. One of the things that we do want to make sure is that it does go about here, and you need to go about and use the latest version of the workbook. Now, one of the things it says the latest version when you start working on filling out information in the workbook. If you're going about here and a new version of the workbook comes out after you've already started filling out the current one, you do not need to switch. All right, so that's going to be one of the things that we should go through and mention with this in terms of this workbook's in there. So if all of a sudden there was a new one comes out here, a scout doesn't need to go about and, oh, let me go through and refill out the different forms, get it into this other format. So definitely it is well known that scouts take some period of time, some scouts longer than others, and it could very well be that a scout, the workbook might change from the day that they started working on the project and trying to complete the Eagle Scout service project requirement versus the time it is actually 100% completed. All right, so they don't have to go back on that. Now, one of the things I also do want to mention in here is that some of the different images used in this presentation may not be from the most recent version. If we actually do look in here, I don't know if you can read the part where it has what version it is. I believe that is in here. It actually says October 2015. That is certainly not the most recent version in there. So I'm just kind of highlighting that these images are going to change around. Actually, I probably should update this because this is going about here. It has, Boy Scouts of America. I probably should get that changed around so it has Scouting America listed in there. All right. So there's a few things with this. All right. So again, we had mentioned in here that there are 3 primary sections in the workbook. The first one is the proposal. All right. So this is the section we've done first. And again, where we're looking at it with this presentation, that should have already been completed. All right. The next part that we want to look at here is it does go about, and in that thing talks about some instructions about how to go through and work on your project. All right. A couple things it does mention in here is that to beginning the work on your project should only occur after the proposal has been fully approved and after you've gone about and finished your project plan. Okay. Note that the steps that they have in there. You're first supposed to write up your project. Second, you're supposed to get it approved. Okay. Then you're supposed to write up your project plan. And then fourth, this is the step that you're supposed to do the project in here. So as we're kind of talking about, this particular presentation is assuming we're at the stage where we're doing the project. It should imply that those other previous steps in here, okay, writing the proposal, getting that proposal approved, writing up the project plan, have already all been completed. All right, so those are a couple assumptions that we're assuming and we're working forward through with right now. All right, so here's going to be the second piece, okay, the project plan. Again, this should be done after the proposal has been approved. And again, when we look from the information from the proposal to the plan, there's going to be some similar items in there, but they're going about it in the plan more detail. So we're showing that there has been that planning, that development has been done as we get to more and more details as we move farther along. All right, so those are a few things we want to look at in here. All right, so here's again is some different tools. All right, kind of talking about here, one of the items in here about saying, a scout should complete the plan before giving out the project. Ask the coach to review it in there. And one of the big questions always comes in here is always talks about how much detail should really go into this. And oftentimes the answer, a good answer that a lot of people will give is that you want to put enough detail into this project plan. So if you were unable to be there on that day of the project, let's say that you're going to go about and you're going to get the Congressional Medal of Honor. Okay, so you got to be in Washington on that particular day to receive this information. Someone else could pick it up and complete it. Right. So those are some of the ideas that we really want to look at is what that detail is in. All right. And I certainly know a lot of scouts who have come back and told me that, oh, yeah, I didn't quite plan it well enough. And so we had some challenges on the day of the project. And also other scouts said, no, I put a lot of detail and thought into my project plan. And the day of the project went great. It was easy. We took care of all those different things. So this, the information, the planning that we go into does pay off as we go about as we're working on that project. All right. So we're looking at this on the day of the project. We're now ready to carry out the project. Okay. And here's kind of mentioning here, the better detailed is in here, the easier the days of the project usually go. All right. And again, how much detail should be in the plan? Ideally, if someone else can use your project plan to carry out the project without flaw, that's what ideally we're looking for, is how much detail should be in that plan. Okay. Now, a couple other things that we also want to make sure we remember in here is that we have to remember that one of the wording in that requirements is to give leadership to others. Okay. So a big thing is that the scout, the Eagle candidate, is the one who needs to provide the leadership. Right. Now, this includes leadership of all the people working on the project, including any of the adults. All right. And so this is sometimes, it's certainly a challenge for different scouts. They may not have had to go about and be the leader for other adults. All right. But this is something that they need to go about and kind of work on and get that experience of. All right. Now, of course, one of the things is that the scout can certainly go about and solicit advice, and adults can certainly offer ideas, but that final leadership responsibility does fall to the scout as they're working on these. All right. Now, Corporal, another thing we also need to remember to deal with is that we need to make sure that we are following the safeguarding youth training during the Eagle Project. All right, so this means 2 registered adult leaders, 21 years of age or over, are required at all Scout activities, including meetings. And so that means that this is going to include the Eagle Scouts Service Project required. And also, if we're going to have any sort of female youth present, okay, a registered female who is 21 years age or older must also be present in there. All right, so those are a few things that we want to make sure that we include with these pieces in here. So this idea about safeguarding youth, this does go about here and apply not only to campouts, troop meetings, but also to our Eagle Scout Service Project. All right. And again, we can go through and we can look at those information there. There's a kind of link off to that training in there where we have those different pieces of information. All right. So now let's get into some of the meat that we really want to go about and talk about. Let's look through this project report. Okay. One of the big things that we have in here is just kind of looking at what were the dates, when did it start, when did it finish. First couple of things it has in here is it says, hey, just give an overall description. Yes, this is part of a document in which we have other descriptions as part of the document, what the plan is, but go about and summarize it. One of the things that also could happen here is that by the time we get to this part of the project, there could have been some changes, okay? And so those are some things that we might want to do with this and kind of update these changes in here. Other thing that we also want to look at here is this next section talks about what you did after your proposal was approved and had to complete the planning. So it's kind of look at here, hey, how did you go about and complete that planning section? You know, what was going to be the steps that you went through? How did you go through and work those out? How did you determine those things? So these are some ideas that scouts might want to think about it because, again, these are things that might come up and might be asked in that Eagle Scout Board of Review. All right. A couple of things that we also look at here is what went well during the project, what was challenging. Okay. Also, another thing here is what might have changed. All right. So those are some things that might have come up. There certainly is going to be many projects in which there's going to be a little bit of change from the proposal to how it's actually filled out. This could be from things where the beneficiary decides, oh, well, we want you to do X as opposed to Y. Other things you might realize is, well, I'd like to do X, but that's kind of really challenging and we don't have somebody with the skills, so we really can't do it. Or maybe X is just way too expensive and we weren't able to raise that much funds. So we had to kind of change around a little bit what we were needed to do or what we could do as part of the project. And so those are things that should be discussed here as part of this report. All right. Another big thing in here is talking about the leadership. All right. So we mentioned in here that give leadership to others is a requirement that needs to be met during the Eagle Scout Service Project requirement. And so here's going to be the opportunity to go about and try to list out in here what ways you demonstrated leadership. What was challenging about being a leadership? What was rewarding? What did you learn from that? All right. So these, again, are certain questions I've certainly seen asked many times during Eagle Scout Board's review. And so this is kind of giving the scout this opportunity to try to figure out, how do I want to go about and answer this and give an insight into what I think should be the right answers or how I should approach this idea so that I can successfully complete that Eagle Scout Board of Review. All right. Other things that we want to look inside of here is that there's a section in here talking about materials, supplies, tools, and others. And it's like, where there's shortages, did we not have all the different information that or the different materials we might have needed? Did we not properly plan for stuff? All right. So those are going to be some things that we want to go through and look at and recognize and see what happens. And it's not so much that we're doing this to identify shortcomings of the scout, but to go about and maybe ask the question, okay, if I need to do a project later on, how might I be able to approach that idea so it doesn't happen again? All right. Now, the other thing, and this ends up being kind of a very important part in here, is that we're looking to go about and record the hours. All right. One of the big things is that this information does get recorded and reported up to national. How many total hours did everybody work on the project? And this is going to be stuff, if we go about and we look at in the oftentimes in some news releases and stuff, they'll say in here, the scouts spent X amount of hours this past year helping their communities. Well, a number of those hours come from Eagle Scout Service Project requirements. All right. So going about and keeping up this information is important. It goes about and it shows, yes, the scouts are doing these great things in our communities, and here's how many hours kind of went through with this. Now, one of the big things we also want to go through here and mention with this is we want to put down here is that we want to include ourselves and also how much time was spent in planning. All right. A lot of people just kind of focus on the total number of hours worked during that day. All right. But they forget about how much planning went into pulling off that project. All those things are actually important in terms of trying to figure out how much time was devoted in terms of getting this work done. Yeah, so you're just kind of putting in here some different numbers, how many people, how many hours they went through, and then kind of having some sort of a total as we're working through and getting that done. All right. So there's going to be some stuff with that. All right. Now, again, in terms of this, looking at our projects, most of the time there's going to be some sort of funding that needed to go through, some sort of money that needed to be raised in order to get the materials, et cetera, that was needed. And so kind of having our next page of the report, so this is getting into page C, so the third page of our report, is looking at here, how did the funding go? All right. And so how much money did you obtain? How did you collect it? How it was spent? If expenses exceeded your funds, how did you go about and deal with that? If you had money left over, what did you do with that money? Okay. And then another thing in here is I always like this thing here. How were the donors thanked? All right. Very important to make sure we don't forget to say thank you to those people. Okay. With those things. And, so those are some things you're kind of looking at here in terms of this report, kind of identifying what happened again. What are some of the things that maybe not have been the parts where we were actually building or working on something or carrying out the project, but there's still a whole lot of behind the scenes actions and events that occur, and we want to talk about those in terms of our report. All right. Now, as we're getting into our kind of the end of the report in here, one of the things is that oftentimes we'll have some ways in which we'll go about here and document it with different photos, et cetera. But down here at the bottom, one of the big things we wanted to go about here and look at is how do we go about and have the candidate promise that they went through and basically completed stuff. All right. So there's 3 different sections that we're looking at down here in this end. And this is going to be the thing that kind of says that how did we complete the project in there, or when did we complete the project? All right. So the first thing is that there's an approval section where the Eagle candidate, the scout, goes about and basically they sign in there. And they said, yes, I was the leader of the service, Eagle Scout service project requirement and executed it as reported here. So basically saying, yeah, this is what I did. Okay. Next with this, we also have to have signatures from the beneficiary saying that they're satisfied that the project was completed to the best of their knowledge. Okay. And then also from the unit leader. So those are going to be kind of the last 3 signatures that we end up having in this workbook section. All right. So the scout saying that they completed it, the beneficiary saying it was completed, and the unit leader recognizing it was completed in there. All right. One of the things is that we want to note here is that the unit leader's signature is basically a statement that the scoutmaster, whoever the unit leader is, agrees that the Eagle Scout candidate properly completed requirement number 5, that they went through and they planned, developed, and gave leadership to others in a service project. Right. The unit leader is not normally a member of the board of review. Okay. They're actually, per the BSA's through the guide to advancement, they're actually not allowed to be part of the board of review. Okay. And so this is going to be where they go about and they have this ability to say, yes, I agree that the scout went through and completed this requirement. Okay. All right. And so once we've done that, that's kind of the end of the workbook in there. Couple things to kind of note inside of that is that at the proposal section, there was one more signature that was required in there. That was going to be the signature of basically a district or council level approval. And that actually isn't occurred in that last section of the workbook, because as I mentioned before, that approval occurs during the board of review. So now let's go about and let's talk about here. We've completed the project. We finished up filling out that workbook. And now what we need to do is we need to start working towards our board of review. So the big thing that we're going to have here is we have to start filling out the Eagle Scout rank application. So there's going to be the big thing we're going to work on here and start filling out. All right. Again, this, as we mentioned, this is on the Pathway to Adventure website there. All right. And so there's a couple of main sections in here. One of the first one is a personal record for the scout. looking at the date that they joined scouting, the day that they completed different boards of review. Okay, so those are going to be some information in here. Another item that's inside of here is listing for these letters of recommendation. One of the things, if you remember right, or if you remember, was requirement 2 goes about and talks about that we have, was it the scout has demonstrated that they live by the scout oath and law, right? And so a big difference between the Eagle Scout Board of Review and other boards of review is that for the Eagle Scout Board of Review, the scout is required to get letters of recommendation from others that attest to them living by the scout oath and the scout law. And so these letters of reference are basically the people that the scout's going to go about here and ask to fill out these references for them. All right. And then down here at the bottom of the first page of the application is going to be what were all the different merit badges that the scout actually had gone about and earned. Now, there's a number of different ways that the scout could go about and get this information. They might have a record themselves. There's often the troop has some sort of a advancement chairperson, something like that. But one of the big things, one of the easiest ways to do it currently is that using the Scout Book, and actually I guess it's now called Scout Book Plus and Internet Advancement, all the different pieces in there. There's an actual way in which through that report, the scout can go about and kind of get this PDF form created, all right? And it'll actually go about and automatically fill in those completion dates for all these different merit badges in there. So those are some good things that will go in there and actually kind of keep the scout, makes it a lot easier for the scout filling out those different pieces in there, all right? One of the things is that if you're going through here, kind of look through this stuff, verify that you got the dates correct, that you know which merit badges you've completed. I do know one scout in my troop, we were 3 months and a half out from when that scout turned 18, and the scout realized that they hadn't completed one of the 3 months merit badges yet. They got confused on which merit badges they had completed. So it's a good thing we looked at that on the day that we did, because if we would have waited, we were actually up at summer camp. Had we waited until summer was over and we started our normal troop meetings before that question got asked, the scout would not have been able to complete the Eagle requirements prior to turning 18. So those are some things to kind of keep on top of that. All right. One of the other things with this is that there's a couple of different merit badges that you have for the required list, which you have choices on. Could be things like life-saving or emergency preparedness. And so one of the things is that in terms of the different items in here, we're listing out the merit badge, particularly for the required ones. Fill out the dates of the ones that you got the merit badge, you earn the merit badge for, and you're using for the requirement, and then you can line out the ones that you don't have in there. All right, so this would mean if I ended up getting emergency preparedness and not life-saving on the form, I should kind of line out the word life-saving so that it's clear that I earned emergency preparedness. All right, now the next thing I want to put down here is this is going to be a letter of reference form that's being used, and this is actually available on our council webpage. And there's kind of 2 pages with this on here. First thing I do want to mention is that the scouts are not actually required to go about and use this. And if we look at the first page, there's nothing really all that special or important about the this first page of this document. Okay. The thing that I really like about it is going to be on the second page. Okay. On the second page, it includes a kind of instructions for the scout and also instructions to whoever is writing the letter of reference. All right. The comment I always use in here is that remember this letter of reference is to go about and attest to how the scout lives up to the scout oath and the scout law. All right. The person who is filling out the letter of reference doesn't necessarily need to know all the details of the scout oath and the scout law to be able to attest to that. And so this letter here, this form, helps go about and identify what are the different points of the scout oath and the scout law and how the scout might go about and complete those different items in there. So in particular, let's say that a scout has gone about and asked a teacher at their high school to fill out the a letter of reference on there. That teacher may not know anything about, the scout oath and the scout law. And also, it's not a letter of reference to say how well the scout is doing in that particular subject. Okay, we hope they're doing well in that, but that's not really the importance of the letter of reference. And so this helps guide that letter writer to write an appropriate letter. The other thing that's also being mentioned in here is that these letters are not to go back to the scout. Okay, they're supposed to go back to another person normally oftentimes in the troop, someone who has gone about and been identified with the scout, to who's going to collect these and make sure that these letters are going to go about and get to the Eagle Board of Review. So there's a spot on the particular form here that goes about and identifies who these letters are supposed to get returned to. All right, so those are some good things that we want to mention here. So this is kind of really nice about this letter of reference form. As again, the first page, pretty simple, pretty generic on that. Nothing special on that. But the second page, I really like the information that's there. Okay. All right. Now, a couple other things we want to make a mention about here is that when the scout for these things, they're supposed to go about and contact these references. Okay. So you go about and you ask that. They can use the letter of recommendation form, or the person can write a letter, etc. Okay. The letter does not go back to the scout. It should go back to somebody else who's already been identified. This could be the committee chair, some designee in the troop, somebody else, or sometimes even the District Eagle coordinator, or someone who is coordinated there with the District Eagle coordinator. All right. So a number of different people could receive this. It's, again, somebody who is going to make sure that those letters get to the Board of Review. Okay. All right. And so one of the things with this is that the way that this information is really preferred that it comes back in here is that it's to be returned via mail. All right. Not through email. One of the things is that these letters are meant to be kind of shared with the members of the board only. All right. And so if they're emailed back, it has the possibility that it could get shared beyond people who are trying to go about here and set this up. So oftentimes it's really nice to end up having here this addressed stamped envelope provided in there, so it makes it easy for the letter writer to return this reference to the right person. All right, so there's a number of different things with this. All right, and so there's going to be kind of our idea that we want to look on this. Those are the main things that the scout needs to do with this. One item that I actually realized here is I'm going through, and there's been a recent change in the letters in here. It used to be that once the scout had gone about and asked for the letters, they really didn't have to do anything else. But actually, in the most recent version of the Guide to Advancement, the scout is expected to kind of follow up if not all the letters have been turned in, to go through and actually try to re-ask the letter writer, remind them, hey, we're going to do this on here, so please go through and deal with that. All right, so those are a couple things we do want to mention with that. All right. In looking at the Eagle Rank application, okay, we already mentioned here this personal record that had a number of different dates in there about board's review, different positions that the unit that they had held. One of the requirements there is going to be what was a position of responsibility held within the unit. So those are going to be some information that the scout needs to own here, to put in here. Dates of different merit badges, okay, and which merit badges were earned, all right? And so again, we mentioned in here to obtain the records, you can get it from the troop advancement person, from Scout Book. Again, that's probably the one that most people are going through and using these days. Internet Advancement also goes about and has this information there. If we're kind of looking at how we could do this inside of Scout Book, now, of course, Scout Book has been modified and has been changing a lot recently. And this form, when I checked, this was still the approach that we could still get it in there. Whether it's going to be the same tomorrow or not, I can't guarantee. They're kind of working on different stuff with this. But anyway, if we go about and we start looking through the scout's profile, okay, and you look at the different scout inside of advancement, there's going to be a report section for that scout, all right? And then when you click on that, there's a spot in here that comes up and it mentions here the Eagle application. So that would be the spot where you could go about and click on this, and then it will automatically generate a fillable PDF form with the information for the scout already filled into it that can be downloaded onto the computer, okay, that you're running this from. And that can go about here and be started off and help the scout in terms of filling out that information. All right. So now on the other side, on the second page of this thing, there's a number of different signatures that need to be required. All right. First of all, there's going to be a signature of the scout, the candidate who's going forward in here, basically saying, yes, I've gone about here. I've got everything filled in correctly. There's also a signature for the unit leader and a signature for the committee chairperson. All right. So those are all different things that where they're coming about and verifying that these signatures are going to be needed. All right. And so then what's going to happen with this is that as we go about in terms of here, we want to make sure that we end up using, again, the most recent version of the form, okay, that we're going to have here for the rank application. Those do change around every now and then, so do make sure we use the latest version of the form with that. All right. Now, there's one more item that I want to go about and identify here. Oftentimes, I've referred to this as the hidden Eagle Scout requirement, partially because the only spot where this is mentioned is not in any sort of the books, but it is as part of this application. And so one of the things that is being mentioned with the one of the things that's actually being mentioned here with the with this hidden requirement, it says in preparation for your board review, prepare and attach to your Eagle Scout rank application a statement of ambitions and life purpose and a listing of positions held in your religious institution, school, camp, community, or other organizations during which you have demonstrated leadership skills. So this is a statement that needs to be kind of turned in with the application. Some people go about here and call this a life statement. Other people will call it here a statement of ambition. There's a couple of different things that this has been called in there. I always go about, and since most of the time, most people are familiar with writing a college letter in terms to go about and for applications to college, I oftentimes refer to this as being, this is kind of the scouting version of that scouting letter. All right. And so a lot of times what will occur is that scouts might write both of these, and whichever one they write first, that becomes kind of the draft for the other one. All right. So those are kind of things that we want to make sure. All right. And so now once we've gone about and gotten those things in there, those signatures, the statement of ambition or life statement, how do you want to refer that in there, our workbook in there, we go about here when we're ready to go about and have our board of review. We first have to go about and submit information to our council service center in order for this to get verified. One of the things that we also want to make sure is that we do go about and we have copies of all the different documents so that if something gets lost, we won't have to start over. We have copies hanging around. And so we mentioned in here is that we want to have that Eagle Scout rank application with that statement that we just had, that life purpose statement. The workbook that we want to have with completed signatures, okay? Signatures that we mentioned in here. And then also it has their other attachments. These other attachments would go about and be things like protect photos or items like that that might be as part of the project or part of the workbook in there. All right. So we want to go about and deliver these items to the service center. So for all the scouts in Pathway to Adventure Council, we've got basically 4 service centers. Okay. Most of the processing is done at the local service center. So that's going to be out at the Hammond office, LaGrange office, the downtown office, or also out at the Arlington Heights office. So there's a couple of different ones in here. So pick the one is more convenient for you to go to in there. All right. And so one of the things is that they'll do is that they'll go through and they'll kind of verify that all the information is correct. And they also want us to use this special envelope. I got a slide, the next slide will actually go about have a photo of it so we know what we're talking about here. All right. And so that goes about here and kind of helps us keep track of all the information, helps it keep organized in council with this. And so one of the things is that at the Arlington Heights office, the person, Kathy, is the one who goes about and she's basically does all the administrative stuff for the Eagle items with that. So if any times there's any questions with this, you could reach out to her and she'd be able to go through and kind of answer stuff in there. But anyway, so here's going to be this special envelope. And so we want to go about here when we're turning items into council for this is to go about and use this envelope in here. One of the things it also mentions in here is a checklist. So right on top of our workbook here, it kind of has what are the different items that we're looking to use. Okay. Also, it mentions in here what are the items we need to bring in for the for our turn and what are the stuff that we need in here. And so basically the main items we mentioned in here are going to be this completed workbook, the application, and then that statement of ambition. Those are going to be the main pieces we want to look at here. All right. A couple other things we also wanted to go about and mention with this is that here's kind of showing us those different pieces. But we also want to mention here is that there's this QR code, and this allows the scout to basically fill out their information, who they are, what's their email address, what troop are they in, etc., and have that stuff be brought in directly into the council's website and their database that they're used with this. This has actually worked out really nice. Prior to us including this form where the scout kind of typed in that information, some member of the council staff would have to kind of go through all the different Eagle applications and put that in there. They went from, what was it, basically taking probably over a month to go about and get these things turned around and back to the scouts to probably about a week. Okay, so certainly once we've gone about and started having the scouts entering in that own information on there, it went through a lot faster. The other thing also is that the scout's email address is now normally typed in, more likely to be correctly typed in than when the person at the council office was doing that, because they didn't know all the different subtleties with the Eagle Scout with their email addresses in there. All right. So anyway, so we mentioned in here this information goes in. Council is going to verify the application. We should always go about and says, hey, you should allow 2 to 3 weeks for this paperwork review. I have known times in which they're able to go about and turn it around much faster than that, which has been great. And so everything is basically checked against the council records. Okay. Any times that there's some sort of incomplete or inaccurate information, they reach back out and they say, hey, there's something wrong here. We got to figure out what's going on with this. All right. So they're validating that the information is correct. And then they're going to go about here and mark it as verified. And once it's been verified, the scout, the troop, their district Eagle coordinator, they're going to be said, hey, it's all been good. Please come in and pick up the paperwork. And then you can go about and start scheduling the Eagle Scout Board of Review. So those are kind of the big things with this. And so this council verification is an important step that has to occur before the Eagle Scout Board of Review. All right. So if we start thinking about what's going to occur during the board of review, all right, one of the things is that, the scout should be asking the unit leader, the scoutmaster, the Eagle coach, advisor, whoever that person might be, to help go about and arrange the board of review. All right. And remember, if email, make sure that we're including parents, scoutmasters, and other people along those lines so that we're meeting that safeguarding youth protection training stuff that we're going to go through and deal with this. All right. And so the unit leaders are familiar with what this process is. Okay. They may not be the ones who do it themselves, but they can go about here and help direct you as who might be the right person. All right. The way our council goes about and does the board of reviews are things that are referred to as an in-troop board of review. Okay. And so the troop or the unit is going to go about and provide 2 to 5 members of the board. Okay. And these are going to be, are not to be relatives or guardians of the scout. Also, they're not supposed to be scoutmasters or assistant scoutmasters. And all members must be over the age of 21. All right. They're also supposed to help determine a quiet, neutral location to hold the board of review. All right. And also a district representative, and this is normally that DEC, that district Eagle coordinator, must also be at the Eagle board of review. All right. So those are going to be people that we would need to have there in order to run the board of review. So this means is that our board, once we add in that one person, that district representative, to the 2 to 5 people, that means that we're going to have here 3 to 6 people, and that's going to be the number that are required. In terms of this, I always encourage units to not go about and only get 2 people in there, because I've been to enough board of reviews in which somebody, due to traffic, whatever is going to happen, just actually can't get there on time. And so if we only have 2 people, one of them doesn't show up, the board would have to get rescheduled. So this way, if we got 3 or 4 or 5 people from the troop coming up, if one person has trouble getting there, the board of review can still progress. All right, so those are some things that are kind of important with this. All right, so in terms of this Eagle board of review, we need to have the following paperwork. So the first thing is going to be, what were those envelope items? So the items in that envelope that we mentioned was the project workbook, okay, that Eagle rank application that has been verified and signed by council, that statement of ambitions, life purposes, okay, and then also we want to make sure that those letters of references are going to be there at the Eagle Scout Board of Review. All right, so whoever's going to be that designee that was determined would collect them, they're the ones you're supposed to go through and make sure that they're there. All right, the scouts should be in uniform, okay, and the Eagle Board of Review kind of takes about an hour. So it's not necessarily that the scout there is necessarily talking to all the board members with this, but they do have to go about, the board will go through here, have to kind of read through the letters of reference. They kind of want to read through a few of the other documents. They're going to have some discussion among themselves, okay? And so all that in total takes about an hour. All right. And one of the big things with this is, I know that this is kind of scary for some scouts to go about and sit down and talk to all these different people. But be yourself, okay? They're all the people at the board of review are hoping that you're going to be successful. They're going to be working with you and working to help you move forward and be successful with this. All right. So after the board of review, okay, the application is going to be returned to council. All right. And so what will happen with the board of review is that there's basically going to be 2 different things. There's either going to be where the board is going to basically approve the scout. Okay. And so in this particular case, only the rank application that has been signed, okay, needs to go about and return to council in that special envelope. But if there was, and also all the letters of reference, okay, are basically going to give to that district Eagle coordinator. So the district person takes a letter of references and then would go about and then they're to destroy them after the Eagle credentials have been released. Okay. One of the things is that those reference letters, the way it's set up is that they are designed to be seen only by the board. And in the world of letter reference writing, the thought is that if the letter is only going to be seen or is not going to be seen by the person who it's written about, the person writing the letter is going to be much more honest and open about what they're going to say about this person in there. And one of the things is that I always kind of think about is that since the scout gets to be the one kind of picking who's going to write these letters, most of the time they're going to pick people who they're pretty sure are going to say good things. So that means all those good things carry more weight. Right? Now, the other possibility could be is that that the Eagles Board of Review may not approve the scout. And if that's going to be the case, then all the materials are basically going to be returned to council or returned, held by the district Eagle coordinator. And then there's going to be an appeals process that's automatically started. All right. So there's going to be a few things that's going to happen with this. And so if that was going to occur, instead of trying to go into details right now, that would just go about and be, talked about at that point in time, how that information was going to get going in there. For the most part, I can honestly say here that I've been doing this for quite a number of years, and I've never had a Eagle board yet that has been denied. Okay, so yeah, we normally go about all the stuff about the review beforehand, those signatures that are endorsing it by the scoutmaster, by the beneficiary. All those things are working in there to set it up so that the scout is successful during that Eagle Scout Board of Review. Okay. All right. So again, as we're mentioning with this, after the board of review, okay, again, if assuming that the scout has been successful, it's been approved, all that needs to go back into the envelope is going to be that signed Eagle rank application. None of the other stuff, the workbook doesn't need to go back in, photos don't need to go back in, that statement of ambition or life purposes doesn't need to go back in, just the Eagle rank application. Backing that up. And again, on the backside, we need to make sure that the board members go about and sign and date the form. Okay. And then there's also going to go about here down at the bottom of this form. It does talk about how to go through and deal with this and what is that information. So if we do forget that, those pieces in there. All right. So then after that's all done, all right, the council goes about and sends off to the national office the information. Basically, Scout Executive goes about, reviews the information. Sometimes this takes 2 to 3 weeks to hear from national office on this. All right. If we haven't heard anything back in about 4 weeks, possibly you should go about and try to contact the local service center to see, hey, what's going on with this? As I mentioned in here, Kathy is going to be the one in the Arlington, who's at the Arlington Heights office, who goes about and oversees all this stuff for our council. All right. So after it's been approved, National goes about and returns the credentials. That's going to happen with this. They'll go about, validates the applications, generates these ideas with the credentials, basically the cards, etc., that says this person is an Eagle Scout. Returns the information to the council. Okay, the council then notifies the scout that the receipt of all the certificates, that it's ready to go with this. And so one of the things with this is that it's at this point, once you've gone about and kind of have heard back from National, that we're able to go about here and says, yes, now the scout is officially recognized as being an Eagle Scout. And it's at this point that the scout can go about and start to plan their Eagle Court of Honor. Prior to this point in time, even though they have successfully completed the board of review, National basically says that the scouts shouldn't say they're an Eagle yet, even though once they've been recognized as the Eagle, the date of that board of review will be the date that they became an Eagle Scout. So there's a little bit of period in there in which we're kind of waiting to hear all the different stuff coming with this. And so the scout needs to kind of wait and says, okay, hold on, I need to hear back from National before I can really say that I'm an Eagle Scout with that. All right. And so one of the things, though, is after this occurs, I do highly encourage everybody to please hold that court of honor for the scout. It certainly inspires other scouts to go through and deal with this. And it is definitely a great way to recognize the achievements of the scout in question, or sometimes scouts, because oftentimes I've been to many Eagle courts of honor in which there could be 2 or 3 scouts, even one in which there was, I think there was up to 11 or something like that, scouts, all going about and receiving their Eagle simultaneously. All right. So last thing I wanted to kind of mention in here is going to be this idea about Eagle Palms. So there's been kind of a change around a little bit over the years. So depending on how long people have been involved with the program, palms were kind of an idea about, okay, you would earn these after so many merit badges and you had to wait for them. Now it's going to be a thing where we're kind of looking at how many merit badges have you earned beyond the required 21. Okay. And so for every 5 merit badges that you've completed before your Eagle Board of Review, you are going to be entitled to an Eagle Palm for every one of those merit badges in there. Now, after you become an Eagle Scout, you can then earn additional palms by completing the following requirements, basically by demonstrating that you're living by the Scout oath and law, having some sort of responsibility or demonstrating leadership. Doesn't actually say you have to have an official position. You just have to have those in there. And then for each additional merit badge, or each additional 5 merit badges beyond getting the Eagle Scout or that last palm. Okay. And so a couple things that I often do here, because sometimes this gets a little confusing with this. Let's say that a scout at the day of the Eagle Board of Review has gone about and has earned 34 merit badges. So that's 13 more merit badges than the 21 needed for the Eagle rank. Okay. So the scout is going to earn 2 palms, basically at that Eagle Board of Review for the 10 of those 13 merit badges. If the scout goes about and earns another 2 more merit badges, okay, they will go about here and now will be at 15, we'll say extra or additional merit badges, and that's going to be enough for that scout's 3rd palm. And then after that, for every 5 more the scout might earn a merit badges, they're going to go about here and earn another palm. And then this information can be updated in Internet Advancement or in Scout. All right, So there's kind of this idea about eagle palms and go with that. All right. So this is pretty much the end of the presentation. Any questions that anybody has at this point, please let us know. Go ahead and ask now, or turn on a mic and go ahead and ask with that, or feel free to go through and type in the chat, whatever you might feel is more comfortable for you.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to clarify when you're talking about the contents of the application envelope, the manila envelope, um, the four things that go in the envelope are the application, the essay, as you pointed out, the workbook, and there's a request for mounted photographs as well. So 12 to 15 photographs with some type of an explanation of what's in each photograph become part of what the envelope is looking for.
Right. Yeah. Prior to kind of a previous version of the workbook, had it where those photos would actually be kind of included as part of the workbook.
True.
But that ended up being too big for oftentimes many documents. So they kind of realized, you know what, let's save up some bandwidth or space if we're trying to move those around, and we'll go about and we'll put those into a separate document for those things. Yes, so those are the items, those extra pieces. What are some photos? And so there's no longer kind of a spot inside of that workbook to put these photos in there. All right. So thank you, Russ.
Correct.
Yes. Thank you for
Yep.
having that in there. All right. What else do we have? Any other questions? If there's not any other questions, definitely would thank you for coming here and listening to us talk about this stuff. Hopefully this information was worthwhile. One of the things that I did want to go about here and mention is that there's my email address, pdtroy@gmail.com. If you wanted to get a hold of the slide deck here, you can send me an email and I can go about and forward that off to you. The pdtroy@gmail.com is easier to get a hold of me rather than ptech.advancement@gmail.com. So that's why I go about and give people this one in here. But yeah, if you want to get a hold of the slide deck, I can certainly send that to you. Also, one of the things is that we are going to go about here, and we've been recording this. We will go about here and get this posted on there. And so sometimes people might say, hey, could I get a recording or a link to the recording of the this presentation so I could review it again? There was one or two things I wanted to double check on. So those are things you could go about and email me with that information with that. All right. So with nothing else, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. I got to click a whole bunch of things.